Okay, we are live. Good afternoon. This is Katie Oropesa, and I am here today with Stephanie Pointer, my awesome co-host. And so today we have as a guest the Hillsborough County Republican chair for the Republican Party. So she reached out to Florida Judge requesting to be heard. Scott Levinson, who's a Republican Party member who ran for that position recently. He came on about 2 weeks ago. Elvis Piggott was hosting that afternoon along with Keela McCaskill. And Scott Levinson had some things to say about how the race went down. I read an article by William March addressing that story about what Scott Levinson said had occurred. And so Carmen Edmonds, she's in the waiting room and she's about to come on shortly to address some inconsistencies that she said she heard during Scott Levinson's interview. So I hope you're having a good morning, Stephanie.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Went to a dog park opening for my friend and fellow civic leader, Sandy Sanchez, who had the Vila Brothers dog park named after her today. Congratulations to Sandy. She received a commendation from the city of Tampa for her hard work and dedication to that park. And honestly, she's one of the most amazing civic leaders I've ever seen. She's the only person I've ever seen make all of city council sing the same song, and she said, "You just have to know which song to play." And so I want to congratulate.
I gotta say that you look extra beautiful today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, yeah. So the hair, something's different.
I think it's down, which is unusual for me.
It looks good.
Thank you.
So let's bring on Carmen Edmonds in just a second. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. What is wrong with me today?
Oh, afternoon. We did this earlier.
Yes.
Know.
Good afternoon, Carmen.
Good afternoon.
What we'd like to start with is like the basic Carmen. Just tell us who you are and why you do what you do, and just give us, a brief 2, 3, 5 minutes about you and how you got here today.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Carmen, and I moved here to Tampa 5 years ago with my husband. He moved here to begin working again in the military contracting world. And before that, we lived in the Midwest. I grew up all in the Midwest, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, went to school, college in Arkansas. So kind of a Midwest girl, and happy to be in Florida, though, because I love the weather a lot better, and I do not miss the snow. In Kansas, I was in healthcare. I was a physical therapist assistant for almost 20 years. Worked in the outpatient setting with sports performance, athletes, and people that have had like total joint replacements and just outpatient orthopedic type situations. But I've always been involved in politics. I had a really great mentor in my 20s that really spurred me on to get involved with politics, to stay involved, stay updated on bills, what was going on in Washington, the local level. And then when we moved to Tampa, I was able to just strictly focus on, we were helping raise our nephew. So I was helping get him through high school, and his best friend actually came and lived with us for a couple of years as well. So kind of doing the mom thing, but then in my free time was able to volunteer for the Hillsborough County Republican Party. Got involved as soon as we moved here with the 2020 campaigns, worked one of the main volunteers for the Latinos for Trump field office here in Tampa. And then in 2022, worked very closely with the DeSantis campaign. So I've just been very blessed to be able to have this free time to really dive deeper into politics, volunteering, just community organizing. I love being out there, being an activist, getting people engaged with their voters in their neighborhoods. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell since we've been in Florida.
And so just so you are currently the chair of the Republican the Hillsborough County Republican Party, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Elvis, I know you have a set of questions. I welcome, Elvis. Glad to see you.
How are you? How are you
I'm
doing?
good.
How are you, Carmen?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful.
So we got the basic Carmen taken care of, and I know you had another list of questions that you wanted to address.
Well, I just want to first say thank you so much for coming on. We wanted to kind of deal with the response more so of last Florida You Be the Judge concerning this topic. We had Scott on the course. And so he shared some different things about what took place and how this election went. First, congratulations on being the new chair.
Thank you.
And so I look forward to great things. But one of the questions, you already introduced yourself. I wanted to hear a little bit about what the candidate, you ran, and about that response. What you heard him say, basically, you ran for this position, just being here for 5 years, I believe.
Correct.
And so you ran for that. There was a vacancy. You decided to run for that. He also decided to run for it. You guys was friends. And at the last minute, it was that you basically were supposed to be going out of the race and not going to pursue. And so therefore, you decided at the last ticking, at the 11th hour, you wanted to jump in, go back in, for there would be no nominations on the floor. And so that's why you went back in. Could you elaborate on that a little bit and give us a little bit more of that background from your perspective?
Yeah. So Scott and I are friends. I actually helped him in 2020 when he ran. The Latinos for Trump office was in the town and country area, and that was part of his district. So I canvassed a lot for him. And then in 2022, I actually helped him raise the last $1,300 he needed to qualify to run for his 2022 race. And I've helped 2 years in a row now, years to bring in the backpacks for his backpack drive. So we are friends and we've collaborated on things together. I've helped him in his campaign. So when we both jumped into this race, we called each other and said, hey, we're friends. How are we going to handle this? I said, well, we keep it above the belt. Because unfortunately, and not only in our rec, but several Republican executive committees around the state, around the country. I mean, we see what's going on in Washington. There is infighting. Unfortunately, there's different sides, people that, for whatever reason, choose to not get along over particular issues. So Scott and I are kind of from the two different sides of that. But he and I have always gotten along. So we talked about, keeping it above the belt. If people on our side or his side seem to get out of control on social media or whatever, we would talk to them. We would ask them to keep it clean. So as soon as we both jumped in, we both started getting a lot of negativity from each side, which was unfortunate. So he and I talked on a regular basis during that 3 weeks. And we talked about, look, how do we make this work? How do we bring the sides together? We've got a really important election coming up. And we really spent 3 weeks talking about unity. How do we unify our party? How do we unify within the four walls of our Hillsborough Republican Committee? And we just had a lot of great conversations. And those are conversations he and I had even previous to that, just because we knew there was, certain people that didn't get along, and how do we make it better? So we did meet, and I, for the sake of trying to figure out a way to make a path forward where it made the most sense for unity, we did talk about me stepping aside. But then when we got to the meeting that night, he and I were informed at the same time that if I didn't run, that someone was going to be brought forward from the floor to run against him. And so he and I kind of talked about it. We were in the back of the room the whole time, and we discussed it at that time in real time. And I said, we kind of went over a couple different scenarios, and I said, look, Scott, I really think at the end of the day, for us to move forward with our whole theme of unity, everything that we've talked about leading up to this point, it would make more sense for me to stay in the race. Because that way, no matter if I won or if he won, we could work out what we had been talking about for those 3 weeks leading up to the election. Because if the other person had won, there was no guarantee that was going to happen. And so really the intent of my heart was not to dupe Scott or to try to betray him or to do anything nefarious. It truly was to keep it to where if I became chair, we could, I could put him in a position of a committee chair or something to give him a chance to lead from the front. And then if he won, same thing. We talked about that. If he won, I would continue to be the precinct development chair, and we would continue to work together trying to bring about both sides. So really in my heart in that moment, just knowing that someone was going to run against him from the floor, to me, that kind of changed the dynamics. It changed what had transpired the night before, because I wanted Scott or I to be in that position so that we could really work on that unity and bringing sides together. And that really was the long and the short of it. There was really absolutely no, like I said, no nefarious intentions or me trying to dupe him. It was trying to figure out in that moment, like, oh gosh, we got to figure out how do we continue to work together and move forward in that band of unity that we had talked about.
So in retrospect, to think about it, I would say that he's right and he's wrong. My question to you would be, when did you inform him that you will go ahead and pursue the run because someone was going to be nominated from the floor? And so if I'm hearing you right, basically, hey, both of you guys are friends, so it's more so I'd rather you have it or me have it than someone else come in and change the whole dynamics of what we're working towards.
Correct.
And so when did you make that decision and inform him, hey, I'm not going to step aside? Because we talked about stepping aside. Once I was informed that someone from the floor could possibly, there's a possibility that you may not win, somebody else could win, and I'm going to go ahead and stay in and let it be me and you. Versus, when did you decide that? When did
It was that night right before the vote. Like, they were handing out the ballots, and like I said, he and I were in the back of the room because we were informed at the same time at the meeting. We were approached by someone together and said, I just need to let you know that, Carmen, if you don't run, this other person is going to run against you. So we were informed at the same time. And so after we were given that information, we sat in the back of the room kind of discussing the different scenarios and what we wanted to do or felt like we should do.
So in fairness to him to say, because I think what he was basically saying is, prior, you guys, the night before, you talked about you stepping aside. So in his mind, you're stepping aside. We're going to this meeting. I'll be the chair, because if you step aside, it's only you two in the race. I'm not soliciting. I'm not calling people to make sure they're at the meeting, make sure they vote, make sure you come, because now we already got a clear direction the next day what we're doing. It's not until the last hour, that few minutes right before the vote, that is, hey, somebody else is running. You have to make a critical decision immediately. I got to stay in. As much as I want to step aside, it defeats the purpose to step aside and someone else get in and change what we have going on. So I'm going to stay in. So in his understanding, he loses the ability to have those people to galvanize all who he thought he could bring to actually compete with you fairly, because he's under the impression you're going to step aside. Is that fair to say it? I mean, because if me and you're running and you tell me on Thursday that you're stepping aside, Friday, I'm no longer phone calling all day. I'm no longer Friday morning saying, hey, tonight is the meeting. Are you coming? Are you coming? Are you coming? We already got understanding. But then Friday night, it changes. And I'm like, gosh, I could at least have 17 people come that I knew would have came and voted for me. But do you sense that, or perhaps no, that's not how it would have been?
I don't think that's how it would have been. I don't think it was 17 votes. He and I were very close, because in those 3 weeks, we both had groups of people calling membership, getting a feel for who was going to vote for whom. And it was really, really close. And I know he'd mentioned like the state legislators were not allowed to vote, but that is not, that's in our rules. They never called in. Our rules concerning that is if they want to vote in a vote, they have to notify the Hillsborough County party 3 days before the election, because you have to work out an electronic way, like a video type Zoom situation, because they have to participate in the meeting and then vote from that. And no one ever reached out to the standing, like the acting vice or the acting chair at that time, to make those arrangements. So those votes never would have counted because they didn't do what the process for them to be able to vote. As far as people, I know Scott said somehow people found out on his side. We both promised each other secrecy the night before because we didn't want it to get out. We didn't want people to get upset or anything. So I know I didn't tell. So I don't know how it got leaked, but I do know that I received an email from someone that was one of his supporters after the fact, admitting they were called and told not to come. And that didn't happen from my side. I don't know who called this person, but it was a Scott supporter, and he emailed me and said he was called and told not to come. So I don't know. That's a question you would have to ask Scott or
Can
some
I
of
jump
his
in real
people.
quickly, please? One, because you said Elvis Piggott just asked you a question, a fair question about he's calling it. Yes, Scott's right, and in part, and maybe know that he's not right in part, but he's asking. He asked you whether he had a disadvantage because you all had an agreement the day before. So the next day, he's calling off people to not go in support of him because he's made a deal with you. And you just said that no, he wouldn't have had a disadvantage because you guys were close as far as support with the numbers. So if that is true, if you all were very close the day before, then that would have more so disadvantaged him because you were close. I can understand if he's not disadvantaged, if there's a wider gap, which would have made it challenging for him despite your turnaround with what you agreed with him the day before. But if you're close, then it does make sense that he was disadvantaged when you, at the 11th hour, decide, no, I'm gonna have to run, despite what I agreed to yesterday.
Well, one, there's no way of knowing how many people from his side were informed not to come. I have no way of knowing that. And then also knowing that someone could have been brought forward from the floor that night of the vote. I don't understand why anyone was told not to come because every vote counts the day of.
Okay, that's a fair point. But let me ask you this as a follow-up. That night, there's no way to know. Did you say, Scott, we made a deal yesterday. How many people did you call off that would now make it not a level playing field because now I'm reneging and doing a turnaround and not honoring the agreement that I made with you? How many did you ask that question to him?
Well, the night of, I didn't know that they were calling people, telling them not to come.
Did you ask if that was happened?
I wouldn't have known to ask, is my point. I wouldn't have known to ask because I didn't know they were calling people, telling them not to come.
But
because it was supposed to be secrecy.
Correct.
Anyway, from both sides to not say anything.
I understand, but you could have secretly, just you and him, you could have asked that question. I mean, you have to.
But I wouldn't have. Well,
you would. I would have. You would have the. That's what you do. You galvanize, like Elvis said. You call people at the day of. Politicians do that all the time that are running it for office. The day of, they say, "Come on, folks," especially because voter apathy. Come on, folks, let's go out, let's be present because every vote counts. So I would have, or someone should have the foresight, especially when you make a deal the day before, to say, hey, look, I want this to be fair. I know I told you yesterday I'm not going to run, but now at the 11th hour, I am going to decide to run. Is that going to affect your ability now to have a fair challenge with me? Did you call anybody off? Oh, you're saying that you all had a secrecy that he wasn't supposed to tell people that. So I see what you're saying now. I get it. So you don't know, but
I wouldn't have known to ask that question
because he was not supposed to tell people. Well, listen, anyway. I've spoken to Scott, and he might want to come back as a follow-up to address that point, because I think in his mind, from my conversations with him, he believes that it turned into a situation where he didn't have then the sufficient time. Look, as I think about it more right now, you had a secrecy. Thank you, Elvis, for telling me, hey, this is why that couldn't have happened and why it's not, maybe she shouldn't have thought of to ask that question. However, if it's secret and he can't tell people anything, then he's screwed. I'm gonna be blunt.
Not
That's not
really.
the most
Not.
perfect. He is screwed because now at the 11th hour, you guys have a secret. He's not telling anybody anything. He doesn't have the time now. He's in a race. He doesn't have the time to call people and say show up. That was the unfortunate thing about this whole situation.
But that's not exactly how you're explaining it. Isn't how it really works, because when there's a board election, anyone can be brought forward from the floor. That's why we vote with blank ballots. So short-sighted, one way or the other, I don't know why anyone, and I'm not saying just Scott, but why anyone, if they were running for a race where anyone could be brought forward from the floor the night of, would even tell people not to show up to vote for them, because anyone can be brought forward in that moment to run against them. Whether Scott and I had an agreement or not, he was still at risk of running against somebody else that could have been brought forward that night that was going to happen if I didn't run.
But he would have told his people to be there.
But
he should have told them to be there anyway, because someone.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I'm kind of disturbed a little bit, because it seems to me like there was some glad handing going on behind the scenes the night before. And I don't know how I would feel about that if I were a voting member of the committee, period. Because making a deal between the two of you, I don't think it's appropriate to start with.
Right.
Last meeting, but wait. But technically, if somebody was going to make a motion from the floor, that person hadn't been running for months or however long you guys run your elections. But technically, that person probably didn't have much of a chance coming up last minute Lucy on something anyway. I mean, I look at this and I'm going to tell you, bottom line is that, and I'll be the first person to tell you, I'm not a Republican anymore. I haven't been for years, because I don't believe in the crap that has been going on. But I'm going to tell you this, that we have sunshine laws in this state, and going around making sidebar deals is not appropriate for anybody. And had I been on the interview a couple of weeks ago, I was at my mother-in-law's, but had I been a part of that, I think I would have called it then. Because to me, nobody should be sitting around behind the scenes making a deal, because you're manipulating the vote anyway. And two wrongs don't make it right. But man, the more I hear about this, the less I think it's upstanding for your members. The less I think it's upstanding for the community who you are trying to convince to be part of your party. I mean, if you're making sidebar deals, I mean, I don't know. And I'm not criticizing because you're a Republican, and I'm just saying that I'm listening to what you're saying, and what you're saying to me, what you're saying to us is this conversation was had in secret. It was an agreement that was made behind closed doors without the knowledge of the constituency who was going to be voting for you. That is a big problem to me.
Well, and just to interject.
I mean, that's just something I had to say about it.
Just to interject a little, when it comes to the process, I don't think no elected official or any candidate don't have some kind of conversation outside of because when I ran for office, I had several people call me and say, hey, you drop out the race, give me your support. I'll make you this, you can work on this. I was a part of the democratic process as well back in that time, and they did the same thing. I said, as I would say to Scott, I said to Scott, as I say now, it did not prove or show good leadership. If by any means necessary, even if Carmen was in the race with Scott, someone still could have been nominated from the floor. It doesn't change the fact those votes still could have been split. It don't change the fact about who comes and who don't. If that was the case, Scott had an ultimate responsibility to go in and run for the job which he wanted. Him deciding to say, and her saying, I'm stepping out of the race, for You Can Do It is not necessarily a malicious deal. It's more so a deal of keeping in reality. And I'm going to say it like this: while everybody across the nation begged and urged Nikki Haley to get out of the race, get behind the support of our president. The reason why is simply because it don't make sense to continue to divide the party instead of now pulling them together to get to the ultimate purpose. And so at the end of the day, I think that Scott could use this as someone manipulated, duped, tricked. It's one of those things that he had a responsibility, and his supporters, whether they was voting for him or not, should have been voting in the process. For someone to be named, they will be nominated against Scott on the floor, when we say they may not would have had enough votes, I beg to differ. I was saying because there was one person running. If someone nominated on the floor, that means all of Carmen's supporters and everybody else is going to go behind the person nominated because we don't want you.
And how do you know that the person that's going to be nominated? You're right, Elvis. I'm going to have to agree with what you just said. How do you know that somebody silently is going to do a surprise and run and has already quietly garnered a lot of support?
They don't need to garnish it. They don't need to garnish it. Whoever's on the floor at that time sitting there is going to vote for who they don't want. When you're doing that voting process.
I understand, but what I'm saying is that somebody that then all of a sudden announces from the floor, I'm running, they already may have had people ready to vote for that person.
Not necessarily. It could be, we don't want to stop.
But it could be necessarily.
Or they could. Or they could have been silently running. However it is, if they're silently running or publicly running, at the end of the day, we don't want Scott. And so clearly, if they're going to say, I'm going to nominate somebody from the floor, it had to be, we don't want him to go unopposed.
This displays somewhat of a fracture in the local Republican Party, perhaps, because I don't understand why.
Democrat Party, all parties.
All of them.
I'm an independent.
Everywhere.
I'm an independent.
Everywhere.
I was a Republican from early adulthood to 2020. I don't care for either party. I'm an independent. But locally, you're trying to create a situation to not let another member of the party win. I don't understand that.
But
no, that's not how that. No. So
from what I heard you say, you said you wanted unity, maintain unity.
Correct.
You have now you're working towards that. So you want to make sure that either you or Scott wins. So how would it have affected, since you're saying that person may have somebody that nominates themselves from the floor probably wouldn't have been able to prevail. What difference would it have made either you to win or Scott to win? How could that I don't understand this.
So there are two sides in our local party. Like Scott and I have talked about, and he talked about that with Elvis, and Elvis knows, I mean, and it's in every party. It's not just our county. It's in the Democrat Party. It's the Republican Party. It's almost every county in our state and the nation. There's, since Trump, in a lot of the Republican executive committees, there's the people that are really more engaged. They came in, they joined the party after Trump lost in 2020. And then there's the people that have been there prior to that. And for whatever reason, that has caused a lot of fractures in a lot of our state local parties. So Scott and I, wanting to bring about unity, wanted to try to somehow forge in whatever way to, even if we could just get, move the goalpost a little bit, 5 yards, 10 yards, to get a little bit more unity and working together within our party. That was kind of our goal. And again, I can truly speak for Scott. When we met that night, there was no nefarious intent in either one of our hearts. And I hear what the other woman was saying, and I get it. And it was short-sighted, and Scott and I both agreed it was short-sighted on our part. We probably shouldn't have gone about it that way, but that's how much the want and the desire to have unity within our local party was, that we were trying to figure out a way from a good intentions. There were no nefarious intentions on either side.
It's just that
and
Scott,
so,
from what I'm hearing, could have achieved the goal that you all have to continuing to grow unity. I don't understand how you would have just not let him run
Because the other person was going to be nominated from the floor, and that person more than likely would have garnered all of my votes because they were from the side that supported me.
I'm
So
just hearing mixed stuff. I'm hearing that the likelihood of a person nominating would have been great, and now you think you would have lost because some.
no,
No. She would have won, but then the reality of it is just at the end of the day, Scott did not have enough support to win. And so if he would have bought all his support, but Scott, again, what she's saying is if she dropped out, which is commendable, to let's make the record clear that Carmen goes and have a conversation the night before with Scott, and she agrees to drop out of the race. Already commendable. I'll step aside and let you take over the seat.
Right.
But
Except
at
that
the end of
conversation's
the-
had when you already know you already knew that day or should have known that somebody could have nominated themselves from the floor.
Well, you don't know if somebody, no, because they can't nominate themselves, but somebody can nominate someone from the floor.
Right. And she
so-
would have known about that at the time that she made the agreement.
Well, they didn't know until the balance was handed out. At that moment, the balance is handed out. Is hey, if you don't run, I'm gonna nominate somebody from the floor. That's just like if I was there at the meeting, I could say, Carmen, if I'm supporting you, I don't want to support Scott. I don't want to do it. So hey, if you don't run, I'm going to nominate one of your supporters or someone else I know from the floor. And if I nominate somebody on your team or somebody that work on the floor, they'll end up winning. Because now we're going to garnish the support of who was supporting you, Carmen,
Okay, so listen,
and everyone else.
I gotcha. So I'm gonna have to get up to speed on this. I think you guys are gonna have an election this year, right? In December.
in December. Mhm.
So I'll just get up to speed and then I'll refer back to this broadcast because
But that's why
I'm
we-
confused.
Right. Well, that's why we always vote. It's in our model constitution and rules and procedure. Any vote for a board position are blank ballots. So no names are written on any ballot. You just get a blank piece of paper
Okay.
because of that very reason that, like 2 years ago when Dana Galen was nominated, she ran against another man. And, but still, even that night, if a third person wanted to have jumped in the race, they had every right to do that according to our model constitution and our rules and procedure because we vote with blank ballots. And so anyone is allowed to be brought forward from the floor the night of a board election. And that's why we have blank ballots, because then 2 years ago with Dana and Bob, Charlie could have jumped in the night of and said, oh, I want to run as well. And that's legal. So the fact that Scott and I had a plan and it truly was trying to create more unity, didn't negate the fact that someone still could have come forward. And that's what we were informed the night together. We were standing there together when we were informed at the same time. Carmen, if you don't run, someone is going to be nominated from the floor that would garner my supporters to run against Scott. And so that's when Scott and I had the conversation and I had to make the decision. And again, it was not for nefarious reasons. It was because of everything Scott and I had talked about. We had great conversations about ways to bring the party together, ways to
I understand what you're
get out
saying.
there.
I understand
Mhm.
what you're saying, but yet again, the day before, I'm assuming that you understood from what I'm hearing Elvis say, you had more support than Scott the day before.
correct.
Okay. So
Theoretically,
you knew that
okay,
okay,
you never know.
I'm going by
You never
facts.
know.
Hold on, Carmen.
There's-
I'm
but
going
there's
by
no-
facts. I'm going by what Elvis just said.
But
Elvis?
but you don't know until it's time,
No.
though, because you
You don't
can't.
know.
You can't say she had more on
I
him.
understand, but theoretically, like you said,
Right.
the possibility existed. You
Mhm.
had more support than Scott. So the day before, Scott is the weaker link of the two of you. You should have not agreed to that, or I suppose you maybe because you may not have been able to look. This is the thing. You knew the day that you made the deal that could possibly happen. You had more support than Scott. You said, "I'll get out of the race."
Theoretically.
You theoretically, right? But you knew that the next day you could have been approached to say, "Hey, if you don't run, we're gonna put somebody in to run."
But you don't think I can talk about when I was a part of the Democratic committee. I went to the meeting to vote. When I went to the meeting to vote for President Ione Townsend, when I went to that meeting, I was nominated from the floor. I had no idea. such foolishness was going to happen. I mean, that made no sense. I had no idea, but it happened. And I was
I understand now,
not
Elvis. So if you would have been Scott, like you said last time, you wouldn't have agreed to what Scott agreed to.
I would have agreed to say, Carmen, okay, you're going to drop out. Thank you so much for letting me be the chair. And then we're going to continue to work together. I wouldn't have stopped calling my people.
Okay.
I would have
All right,
acted
you're
like
right.
a
That's what
leader
you said last
and
time.
showed
Yes,
leadership and called my people to say
That's it.
they're going to be here to support me whether she's in or out.
Gotcha.
Well,
You're
shame
right.
on his leadership for not continuing to keep his feet on the gas
That's what you
and
said
lead
last time.
with
Yep.
great leadership. And that would be a problem for me.
You're right. I stand corrected. That is exactly what you told Scott last time.
Yeah. That was a bad. I think he made a bad mistake. It's not no one duped him. You dropped the ball, and you should have stayed in the place and did what you should have done. Because she can say what she want to say. I believe her. Hey, I'm going to have my people here to back me up. Whether someone's nominated for the floor, whether she's getting in the race or not, my people will be here that's going to support me. And I'm not calling anybody, telling them not to come to a meeting, because I want you to be able to participate in the vote anyway.
And
Right.
Carmen,
So-
listen, you're saying that it wasn't nefarious, and none of us have any evidence to suggest that you had a nefarious intent, because I don't. But
No.
I can understand how Scott Levinson feels like he got duped.
I
Well,
can understand it.
Carmen, do you have any anything you would like to wrap up with us and make sure that you what you need to say?
Yeah. So I know I rewatched the interview again this morning, and I know Elvis asked Scott if he had reached out to me or if we had talked since then, and we did. We talked afterwards, and I sent him text messages because the night of I called him to the front so he could also speak, and we both talked the message of unity, how we wanted to bring sides together to work together. And then I got several text messages from people within our REC that were like, oh my gosh, what a breath of fresh air. It is so good to see you two working together. We can't wait to see, with both of you wanting unity. And I sent him all of those text messages, and I said, look, Scott, like, people are refreshed. People are excited that we can bring possibly unity within these four walls. And so the very next day was the Republican Party of Florida quarterly meeting. And so as new chair, I'm required to go. And I always knew in my mind, and I talked to our vice chair and our secretary, and I said, hey, I want to go to the RPOF and find out how to make Scott a second vice chair. Would you two be okay with that? And they were very amenable to that. And so when I went to the RPOF quarterly, I sought out leadership to find out how I could make Scott a second vice chair, because I wanted him to have a place at the table and to be visible. Because I know one of his concerns was he thought a lot of people in our REC thought he was like a rhino or this or that. And I know Scott to know that that's not true. And so that's why I wanted to give him a place at the table. And I found out from leadership at the RPOF how I could do that. And so Scott and I talked Sunday after the board elections, and I explained that to him. I said, hey, look, I went to the RPOF. I want to make you a second vice chair. What do you think about this? And according to our rules, the fastest way to make him second vice chair, it would have to be a non-voting position, but he would still have a say and he would still have a place at the front table, and people would get to see his qualities and his leadership skills from the front. And in my heart, that was a way for him to put aside people thinking he was a rhino or these things that he was worried people thought about him. And I wanted to give him that place of leadership within the REC. So we talked about that Sunday night. And then I talked to him, I texted him on Tuesday and I said, hey, because I had to get board approval for it before we took it to the vote to the membership. And so I texted him, I said, hey, what do you think about becoming my second vice chair? And, just let me know because I need to get this voted on. And then the next day, Wednesday, is when he sent out that letter. And then William March got a copy, and then it got sent to La Gazzetta. So that was kind of a shock to me that he did that, because I was trying to make him a second vice chair. And then I called him after I got a copy of the email as well, and we had a conversation, and I just very calmly asked why he did what he did, and he gave his side of the story, and I get it, and it's just unfortunate because I really I really wanted to give him a place at the table, and I really meant everything I said about creating unity and bringing both sides together and having Scott be in a position of leadership as well.
Quick 30 seconds for you, 30 seconds and even 15 seconds. I just want to ask because I'm excited. Congratulations. So excited. We're ready to do great things. 15 seconds, Carmen. What are your plans in 15 seconds for this Republican Party as our chair to move this party forward to get elections won?
We're really trying to have more of a presence out in the community. In fact, this morning we're out at the Sulphur Springs Museum with a tent set up, engaging with the community. And we just really need to get our name out more in the community, canvass more, fundraising, but just really put up really great candidates for election and get their names out there and help them get across the finish line.
The African-American community needs you. Let's get out there. Let's
Yes.
get going.
Yes.
East Tampa, all of it. Here we go.
Just-
East Tampa, East, all the papers. Everybody, come on.
Yeah,
Let's
and
go.
we do have a Black Republican chartered club now, and we also have a Jewish chartered club, and we have our log cabin club. So we are a big tent. We're expanding, and we just need people to get involved, and they can go to our website and learn where the clubs meet and attend.
Send me all that stuff, Carmen. We ready
Hey,
to rock and roll.
listen,
I will.
listen.
Thanks.
In
Katie?
fairness, Elvis, you asked Scott about unifying with her and supporting her, and I think he said yes. He affirmed that he would want to do that.
Well,
Yes.
he also said that he had not had no conversation. But anyway,
But
But
we
anyways,
did. We
who
did.
wants to lead
We
us
did, and I
out?
offered him second vice chair.
Well, I hope you guys can figure out how to gracefully converge your
he's
party.
coming.
And thank you so much for coming on, Carmen. We appreciate you.
Thank
All
you, Carmen. He's coming
Thank
because
you.
we need to win elections. Come on, Scott. Come on back home, baby.
Okay. Hey,
All right, y'all have a good
Stephanie
weekend.
Pointer, Elvis Piggott. Thank you for tuning
Appreciate
in.
it.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Bye.